On this Man Machine Alert, we are going to discuss the recent announcement that Trinity Evangelical Divinity School is going to be acquired by Trinity Western University. What that means for theological education in North America, and what led to the decline and fall of this once great institution. Now, for those of you not familiar with Man Machine Alerts, this is where we take recent news, articles, and events and discuss them here with my producer. And we are both graduates of Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, or its sister college, Trinity Graduate School. So we both have had the Trinity experience. And what we're going to do here is we're going to first go over what the announcement actually says. Okay? Now, the first thing is that Trinity Evangelical Divinity School is moving to Canada. The parent university, Trinity International University, is spinning off TEDS. TEDS is the acronym for Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. It's spinning off TEDS, and it's literally giving it to Trinity Western University. And they're doing this as a way of divesting an expensive college.
Yes. So TIU will still exist, still teach undergraduate classes, but TEDS will be gone.
The Trinity Western is not taking on any of the debt. So they're literally being given the Divinity School. The debt is actually going to be paid for by selling the campus.
Yes, it is in what is now prime. It is right off a main freeway into Chicago. It's one of the main freeways between Wisconsin and the Chicago downtown.
Yeah. So it's basically a way of TIU continuing on despite the financial mismanagement it caused. And the downfall of TEDS can be blamed on several factors, okay? There's a cultural factor, which we will get into later, but there was also a lot of bad decision-making and mistakes. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go through some of the bad decision-making to begin with, and then we'll go into cultural factors. Now, the bad decision-making, this is not a full forensic analysis. This is the view of two students who saw this from our perspective as students at the institution. Okay, we're not going to present this in chronological order. It's a sort of a chronological order, but if one event came before another, we're not being strict about the timeline here. Okay, and we'll discuss each of these separately because they're their own problems. Okay, but it does. What we're going to go through here is we're going to show 10 initial points of bad decision making.
And these were beginning to show while we were there.
Yeah.
Both David and I are very grateful that we got to go to TEDS before this all evolved.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we do need to stress here is that this did not happen overnight. This was not an overnight thing. This happened over 20 years. This was a 20-year process.
And we saw this beginning to take place.
Now, in our first year at TEDS, we were members of Libertyville Evangelical Free Church. And for those of you who don't know, Trinity Evangelical Divinity School is the divinity school for the Evangelical Free Church of America denomination. It's its primary seminary.
One point I'd like to make is the fact of how many good churches were available in that area.
It was, yeah.
because we had so many good seminaries.
Yeah.
We had TEDS, we had Wheaton, and we there was a Catholic seminary in the same area.
Yeah, St. Mary's.
So people would hold their pastor up to the academic standards of the TEDs, Wheaties, whatever professors,
Mm-hmm.
and say, oh, well, my professor wouldn't let me get away with that if a pastor gave a bad sermon. So the standard for the churches, we visited, our usual small dozen and would have happily gone to any one of them.
Now, we have to recognize that seminaries closing has been a 30-year trend. Okay? This is another casualty in that. But one of the things that we have noticed is that it's the same sort of decision making that happens at each of these closures. Okay?
There is a distinct
pattern. We're not just picking on heads here. This has happened to other seminaries like Seabury, who also went out of business. Okay, so this is not an exception here. It's the trend, and it's, as I said, it's not just a trend of the culture. It's a trend of bad decision making.
And it's not just the ones who have gone out of business.
Mm-hmm.
There are several seminaries that are patting themselves on the back of how well they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
but they are following these same patterns.
Yep.
And that is one of the main reasons we are doing a Manna machine alert today.
Yeah.
Is to tell these seminaries, hey, wait a minute. Drop the hubris. You're not doing as well as you think you are.
Yeah.
You're following the same pattern, and this is where it leads.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start with the 10 bad decisions Ted's made. The first one was pride. We heard about this in a sermon from D.A. Carson himself. Okay? Now, D.A. Carson was the New Testament research professor at TEDS. The biggest name there, by far. He did a sermon at our church talking about how TEDS won an award for natural environmental planting, and that they were lauding themselves on the back for receiving this award. Now,
emphasis being lauding themselves.
Lauding themselves.
Carson had quite a lot to say about the lauding themselves.
Yes. The thing is that the natural planting was beneficent neglect.
It was beautiful.
They basically just didn't tend to some of the natural woodlands and just let it grow. They had nothing to do with it.
I mean,
that's what they were being awarded for, was having a natural area inside the campus.
I mean, the sidewalks were well curated. The buildings were well curated. But in between was this beautiful forest.
Yeah.
I mean, trees and bushes, and then you had all the animals.
Yeah. There was a beaver.
Yeah.
A beaver.
Out in the back parking lot.
In the back parking lot.
There was this.
They had deer.
Yeah.
Remember that time when it rained?
There was a bog in the back parking lot.
Remember that time when it rained and all those salamanders came onto the sidewalk?
And all the students picked them
up the and put them back?
Yeah.
Yes. But that was the sort of natural area it had. It had this natural beauty to it because they just let it go into that forest / field grass type of area that you get in the plains.
Well, and with any natural planting.
Yeah.
And there is a return now.
Mm-hmm.
People are pushing natural gardens, natural plantings.
Yeah.
It's almost zero cost.
It was zero cost. It was zero cost to maintain because they didn't put any effort or any money into maintaining it. It just let it grow wild.
Nor did they buy plants.
Yeah.
it self-propagated. It was a fully self-contained,
Yeah.
but beautiful woodland area.
Yeah.
You could go in the stresses between classes, you could just go for a walk.
Yeah.
And it was like walking in a forest in some place.
Yeah, it was, because it was a forest. So their first problem was pride, taking credit for something they didn't do.
And the administration that took credit for it was not the administration who had made that decision.
Yeah. Point number 2 is the bookstore. Now, one of the things that attracted us to Trinity was when you first enter the campus, there was a bookstore on your immediate left. This was the front face of Trinity. They decided the bookstore was too expensive to operate, and they closed it down. They didn't understand that the bookstore was their marketing. The first impression anyone got coming into Trinity was the bookstore.
And they failed to understand, if you're an academic or even an academic in training like the students are,
Yeah.
you spend as many hours in the bookstore as you can, because it shows you all the things you don't know yet. And what Trinity was so good at is they had a large section where their professors' books were sold.
I sold software in that bookstore.
Yes, we did.
We had a tool that used to teach people ancient languages called Perpetua. You can't get it anymore, but we used to have that tool, and we used to sell that tool in the Trinity bookstore.
And there were books in there that students co-wrote with professors.
Yeah.
That had an immediate market and showed students, this is the quality we expect you to produce.
Yeah. It was a place where Trinity could showcase the talents and products of its campus members.
It was like a mini museum.
It was like a mini museum.
A mini academic museum, which is awesome.
Yeah, it was. And Trinity didn't realize that this was one of their greatest marketing tools. It showed people who just came off the street that this is what we do. Gave physical, tangible evidence of the quality of their education.
But the guy who ran it, who was a good friend of ours, he was a Trinity graduate. He understood that. He knew it was more than just providing textbooks.
Yeah.
The whole atmosphere when you walked in.
Yeah.
And they had the different kinds of Bibles.
So homey.
Yeah. You know,
it made you feel comfortable to be in there.
You have a 2-hour break between classes.
Yeah.
You don't live on campus. What do you do?
Yeah.
Well, quite frankly, the graduate dining area was not that exciting.
Yeah.
And you'd hang out in the bookstore.
Yeah. So that bookstore was really more of a marketing tool. It really was.
Plus,
and it didn't employ that many people.
No. No, it was run very, very well.
Yeah.
But the people it did employ, besides the guy who was in charge, you had students at TIU, TEDS, whatever.
Yeah.
It was a place for student jobs.
Yeah.
And that is also necessary on campus.
Yeah. So that's the second point, the bookstore. The third mistake I think they made was when they started to do budget cuts. Okay, because they were already in financial trouble when we were around there. We were there from 2006 to 2010. So this round of budget cuts would have been around 2008. And what they did was they cut the highest paid non-teaching staff. Okay? I think this was a monumental mistake. This is who they cut. First of all, they cut their head of security, a guy who had been there for 10, 15 years and knew that campus and everything that went on there like the back of his hand.
And he knew how to deal with undergrad students who kind of freak out a little bit that, they're away from home for the first time.
Or drunk teenagers that wandered in off campus.
Because it was a lovely campus.
Yep.
Yeah. And the head of security could tell the difference between a student and somebody just coming to make trouble, trying to blend in and do their dubious activities.
What was the bigger mistake, though, than that, was cutting their graphic design department. Now, their graphic design department had won awards. Multiple awards for the marketing materials they produced.
Wayne was brilliant. Wayne is the man we took our Photoshop class from.
Yeah.
Wayne had an MDiv. He was fully qualified to be a pastor. And he told us personally of the really tough decision he had to make. He was offered a pastoral position, and he was offered the position at Trinity to be the head of the graphics department. He decided that he could reach more people, train more pastors, have a bigger impact on the kingdom in the role at Trinity. And he was correct.
That graphic design department produced dynamic, interesting marketing materials. They were incredibly good. As I said, they won top design awards.
Against professional design firms.
Yeah. Against professional design terms. And what did Trinity do? It cut that department, fired all the staff, and outsourced it.
With something mediocre.
With something extremely mediocre.
And more expensive. Long run.
Yeah. Really bottom of the bucket kind of marketing materials.
And the fact was, the people that Wayne employed were also Trinity students. And he personally trained people. He trained his staff to become professional graphic designers. Yeah.
It was a terrible mistake to cut the graphic design department, because they were getting those materials at a fraction of the price, and they just didn't do the graphic design for the marketing materials. They did all sorts of other things too. People taught courses in the undergrad department. They were doing all sorts of other tasks. They were doing stationery.
They got their logo. As just part of the salary. They did their business
cards.
Yeah.
They did all these things for the Trinity campus.
And they printed it there.
Yeah, they printed it there. It was all on site.
Nothing was outsourced.
Yeah. It was pound foolish.
While we had breakfast with Wayne several times, he told us, that he had been getting offers from these professional design firms. And they were offering him like literally 3 times his salary.
Oh, yeah. We should point out that all these people, this non-teaching staff that were let go, were being paid less than $70,000 a year.
Yeah.
In Chicago.
They were not making big bucks.
They were not overpaid. Trinity had got these people for a steal.
These people were doing it as their mission to God.
Yeah.
This was their calling. They decided. It kept them in an academic environment, but it also let them do their part to produce excellent students.
It was stupid and short-sighted. And again, the classes that Wayne held had full enrollment. He had even planned on doing a graphic design program
Yeah.
that would have definitely had benefit that school.
Can you imagine that in this day and age?
Yeah.
Christian designers.
Yeah.
Everything is graphic these days. And
Incredibly myopic.
we have used Wayne's teaching in our ministry so much.
Yeah.
Plus, it's a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah. Okay. Issue number 4, mistake number 4. Ted's had an accreditation issue. And this is actually applied more to Trinity International University, the parent organization. And that accreditation issue was that the school was already financially overextended. What had happened is that not only did Trinity International University have a graduate school and a seminary, but they had also bought the Greenleaf School of Law and a radio station, Trinity Radio.
Wasn't that down in Florida?
No, it was in the Chicago area here, but
Oh, was it?
yeah. You're thinking the extension campus, but
Okay.
But what they had basically overextended, and the accreditor said, you can't afford to have a law school and a radio station with the endowment you have. Because what happens is, it's supposed to be, is if your enrollment goes south for a couple of years, the endowment is supposed to pay the debts.
It covers you until the economy changes.
Yeah, or you fix your situation. But the bad decision here was that Trinity decided to sell off the radio station, which is actually the lesser of the two purchases, and kept the law school.
And while the law school is a great idea in theory, it was already a failing law school.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who's good in business should not buy a failing business unless they have a specific plan to turn it around financially.
Mm-hmm.
And all that happened is the problems that the law school had before it was bought by Trinity continued when Trinity bought it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that money would have been much better spent providing scholarships to students who wanted to study law so they could attend top law universities.
Yeah.
I think that would have had a much better impact.
Yeah. Yeah. So the fact that they didn't follow their accreditation recommendations, I think, was a mistake.
You don't get professionals evaluating you and then ignore their opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
so then that's another pride issue.
Yeah.
Another pride issue. Okay. The 5th blunder I think they made was the student center.
Oh my God.
Right after the bad accreditation and all the budget cuts, they discovered, hey, we've got extra $2 million from the sale of the radio station. Let's plunk that in to a new student center for undergrads with a big cafeteria and a big set of meeting rooms so we can draw more undergraduate students in.
And
so instead of,
by the way, it was for undergrads.
It was for undergrads.
There's a street that kind of divided the campus in half. Now, graduate students had the library, which was cool on our side. But the undergrad had all this other stuff. And the graduate students had their own dining area.
And that student center was a walk away from everything except the undergrad dorms. So they put this big student center away from the central life of the campus.
Now, David and I did the walk sometimes, and we played air hockey there, but...
But what they should have done with that money, put it into the endowment.
Endowment.
Like the accreditors recommended.
Yes. They were told you need to sell off assets and restock your endowment.
Yeah.
Because you took money from your endowment to buy these assets.
Yeah.
Sell it off, put the money back where it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that was a terrible mistake. And I think that just accelerated the decline. Okay. So basically spending money they didn't have. Sixth mistake is they got it in a leadership team that wanted to make the campus look more like Oxford. So they took all that natural planting they had won the award for a few years earlier, mowed it all down, turned it into neatly tailored lawns, and it cost them 5 to 6 figures to do this.
And by the way, this is in Chicagoland,
Mm-hmm.
where the winters are some of the worst. Chicago is known for horrible, nasty.
Yep.
So all that flat grassland died.
Yep.
Every winter they had to replant it. And it was dangerous during the winter.
By ignoring the natural planting of the area and turning everything into green lawns, perfectly tailored, they drove up their facilities expenses through the roof. There's two things that cost schools big bucks. That's paying the faculty and paying upkeep the grounds. Those are the two biggest expenses of any university.
And Trinity decided to cut the...
Yeah. They decided to cheap out on the faculty and
up the grounds.
Up the grounds.
Again, they went for what looked good.
Yeah.
Not academic excellence.
Yeah. Now, this all just up to now just accelerated the deficits that they were facing and the expenses that they had incurred. The bigger sort of problems were yet to come. Number 7, they started hiring their own PhDs. Intellectual incest. Now, when a school does this, it's usually one of two things. It's usually laziness or ideology. What had happened during this time was they were starting to give their mid-tier professors buyout packages. Essentially, you are not as famous as our top guys, and you're not as cheap as our assistant professors. You're mid-career, so we're going to pay you out. So you go somewhere else.
But these were people who were just hitting their stride.
Yep.
In 10 years, they would have been.
Yep. Trinity had poured all these resources to raise these professors up to their mid-career.
And the top-tier professors had mentored these people, working with these individuals every single day.
Yep. So this mid-tier of professors,
the next generation
generations of professors left. You know, guys like Sweeney, guys like Van Hoosier, most of the bioethics department. These were top academics in their field, but they were in their mid-career.
Trinity had a nationally known bioethics center and an internationally known bioethics center.
And they fill the slots with their own PhDs. And whenever a school starts hiring their own PhDs, instead of looking outside, you start losing academic rigor.
Well, you don't get any new ideas coming in.
Yeah, no fresh blood coming in.
All you get is the photocopier effect. Everybody knows that you've got your original. Then you make a photocopy. It's looks a lot like the original, but just slightly damaged,
Yeah.
slightly degraded. But then you lose your original and you make a photocopy of the photocopy. Then you
And
make a photocopy of the photocopied photocopy. And by the time you get down to the 5th copy, everything's fuzzy.
yeah, and the worst thing about when they start hiring their own PhDs is they no longer fight for tenure.
Yeah.
They no longer fight for tenure because they know they're not going to be fired, and they know they're going to get tenure regardless.
Now, people don't realize when you apply for tenure, you are putting your current job up at risk.
Mm-hmm.
That individual has to prove by their track record of how many articles they've written, how many books they've written, what they've contributed against some newcomer coming in saying, I want your job and here's my CV.
Yeah.
So it's not just a matter of if you apply for tenure and you don't get it, you don't get tenure.
Yeah.
No, you lose your job to somebody else.
Yeah. What happened was they hired their own PhDs and silently moved them into tenure.
Yeah.
It was showing a rot at the faculty level. And this led to an overall decline in quality at the college. So I think that hiring their own PhDs and firing their mid-tier, or not firing, but encouraging them to leave, I think is a better term. They were encouraged to leave.
Not making certain individuals feel well.
Yeah. I think that was a huge mistake.
One of the ways they did that as well, and this happened while we were there, was when it came out to bonus time.
Yep.
We had several friends, both professors and the non-professor staff, who did not receive bonuses.
Yep. Yep.
They did an excellent job.
Yep.
They just didn't have the money to give out the employee bonus. Yet the administrative staff got a raise.
Yeah, it's not a good look. Okay, that's blunder 7. Blunder 8. They closed their archaeology department. And they basically said they were, again, having financial crisis, and they were going, well, what we really need to do here is focus on the New Testament, streamline our divinity school so that we're not distracted by these other things. So we'll get rid of these successful departments that are distracting us from our core mission and put those resources into teaching the New Testament.
And basically, the archaeology department was fully staffed, had tons of students. It was one of the biggest draws because it was
a
rare.
hugely successful program. And it
was a gem.
It was a gem.
It was the gem in their crown.
Yeah, it was the gem in that seminary by far. And that the archaeology department paid for itself because it had more than 100% enrollment.
It not only paid for itself, it paid for several other departments as they found.
Mm-hmm.
You don't take your cash cow and sacrifice it for an ideology.
But this is what happens when seminaries start declining. We saw the same thing with Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. They closed down their highly successful archaeology department, basically cannibalized the financial resources of the department and put that all into New Testament. And then what you get then is New Testament professors calling all the shots because they dominate the Senate. So Old Testament study starts declining because basically the New Testament guys don't see a purpose for the Old Testament department. You start losing, as I say, students because not every student wants to do New Testament. That might be a shock to some of these guys, but seminary education is more than just making pastors. You're making
I don't
future
know
leaders.
if this is where we wanted to discuss this, but what you get is people in the pulpit who don't understand the Bible at all,
Yeah, and we're going to get to
because
that. Yeah.
the New Testament is the embodiment of the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm. The
So
fulfillment.
you have people who don't write their own sermons.
Mm-hmm.
They just buy them. They mouth them. They don't understand them.
Yeah.
And you have an entire generation globally
Mm-hmm.
of the most shallow Christianity we have ever had in human history.
Yeah. So I think the closing of the archaeology department and turning it over to a New Testament primacy, basically a New Testament primacy department, I think that was a huge mistake. As I said, it took one of the best things about Trinity, the distinctives that made Trinity famous, well known, and well respected, and
The,
just trashed it.
the administration missed the point. They said people want to come here for big lawns and a big student center.
Yeah.
No, people went to Trinity because it had a reputation for academic rigor.
Yeah.
You go to Trinity, you will come out knowing your Bible.
Yes. It produced quality Christian scholars. The list of alumni that have come out of TEDS is very prestigious. It's a who's who of Christian thinkers.
Yeah. The number of books is staggering.
Yeah, the number of books is staggering.
The number of articles, I don't think anybody's bothered to compute.
Yeah.
And not just in theology. I mean, there's so many different centers.
Mm-hmm.
They had a center just on Jonathan Edwards.
Yeah.
You had the Christian history. You had the theology. You had biblical theology versus systematic theologies. And they sold them out for bigger lawns.
Sold it out for bigger lawns. And the pious crud. A lot of pious crud here.
There's a lot of pious crud in it.
And that whole sort of, oh, we're going to focus more on our core mission of creating New Testament pastors. Just sort of, I think, missed the higher calling of Christian education.
That was never the core mission, is to produce academic scholars.
The pastor scholar.
In the pulpit.
Yeah. Or the pastoral professor.
Yes. And that was a key point to TEDS as well.
Mm-hmm.
Most of those professors had some pastoral experience.
Yeah. So it was to produce pastors who, basically the scholar professor, a guy who could go into a pulpit and teach the word with competence and effectively. Or it was to take the professor and allow him to do teaching as the moral exercise of guiding students and raising up people of strong character.
The pastor professor gives you both orthodoxy and orthopraxy as one. Mm-hmm. This highest cred in all these articles of, well, we have to bond with the local churches. Well, that's what we were doing.
Yeah.
There was no division there. As I said at the beginning of this, when we moved there and we were looking for a home church, they were excellent in that area.
Yeah. Well, the closing of the archaeology department was really the beginning of the end. Number 9. They closed Trinity Graduate School in 2024. Now, the graduate school was less known than the Divinity School, but it still was important. It had an important philosophy department that was led by Chris Firestone.
Yeah.
You know, it produced the bioethics degrees. You know?
Of which I have one.
Yep. So Trinity Graduate School was really, really important in its own right. It was smaller than Divinity School, but the fact that they closed it was sort of the next step. And then the final nail in the coffin, number 10, was they closed the in-person campus and went totally online with the Divinity School.
There's no such.
There was no recovering from that.
An MDiv is so much more than information.
It is more than information transfer. It's so interpersonal. It's so relationship based. I mean, what are you going to do as a pastor if you have no interaction with human beings? What kind of pastor are you going to make?
Online counseling.
Yeah, online counseling, yeah. Better health than that fiasco. Yeah, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a life coach.
Well, this is also why all these schools are declining. They're going online.
Yeah.
What do you choose a graduate program for?
Yeah.
The wisdom of those specific professors.
Yeah.
I mean, we are still in awe of the people we got to study under.
Yeah.
You and I walked in there knowing a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it was my second round in seminary.
Yeah.
And I learned so much from those people.
Yeah. Those 10 points, though, encapsulate the mistakes the administration at TED's made. Now, that's not the only thing that contributed to their decline. There's a cultural factor too. And I think this one is super important because as we discussed this before we went on air here, it's become a race to the bottom.
Yes.
Here's what happened. The denomination that basically sponsored TEDS, the Evangelical Free Church of America, stopped requiring MDivs for their pastors.
As did many, many other.
Yeah. So what's happened is you're now getting used car salesmen becoming pastors because they no longer need that MDiv. So what's happening is there's now this race to the bottom between denominations that don't want MDivs and seminaries that are making their online courses cheaper, less effective, and more available.
And just undercutting other seminaries.
Yeah, other seminaries.
Instead of everybody saying, hey, we need academic rigor now more than ever. Our culture's really gone straight into the toilet.
Yeah.
We really need biblical wisdom.
Yeah.
Informing our civilization.
Yeah.
Because right now we're back facing world wars.
Yeah.
We're facing massive homelessness. This is supposed to be the miraculous 21st century.
Yeah.
And it's a cesspit.
Yeah.
And so churches that are saying, hey, people in our pulpits don't need an education.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to quote here a comment by a church historian, Joy Cochran, which when I read this, my mouth hung open, honestly. He said, and he's a former TEDS alumni himself. He says, quote, news of the move to Canada is another sign that evangelicalism in the Midwest is on the decline, end quote. Wait a minute. If evangelicalism is on the decline in the Midwest, moving to Canada is not a better move. Vancouver, Canada is a wasteland.
Oh
if the Midwest is on the decline.
Our first year here, we went from church to church to church to church, trying to find something that was less horrible.
Yeah.
And we kept getting even more horrible.
Yeah.
We found the pastor who wrote his sermons around the joke of the week and then found scripture to fill it.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
We met the guy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
We briefly went to an ethnic church that we weren't part of the ethnicity, but there was a female pastor who wanted to know why they kept getting people in and then losing them. And it was because she was saying the most outrageous things during her sermon.
Yeah.
And when she asked the church what was wrong, and you said, "Do you really want to know?"
Oh yeah.
And you privately told her,
Yep.
we were asked to leave.
Yeah, we were excommunicated at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, well, why'd you ask?
Yeah.
Here's your problem. Why'd you ask? I mean, where are you getting these
There's
sources
your problem.
from?
Yeah.
You're saying really ridiculous things, and anybody who's a mature Christian knows it.
Yeah.
But you were not allowed to criticize the pastor.
Yeah.
Well, that's the problem. All you need to do is get better sources. We were willing to be resources for that church.
Mm-hmm.
We were willing to help her,
but that's
free.
symptomatic of the church in the local area.
Yes.
The quality of preaching in Vancouver is horrible because there's no qualifications to become a pastor here. And anyone can put up a shingle here and call themselves a pastor.
And then you have those same people who are uneducated, prideful, raising up new pastors.
Yep. That's also become very popular movement.
Yeah.
In church training of pastors.
And they're bragging about it.
Yeah. Yeah, so you get one ignorant pastor teaching another pastor to be ignorant.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons...
You have the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Oh, yeah.
Deeply entrenched in the church here. The
Dunning-Kruger effect is deeply entrenched here. This is why very few seminaries here in the Vancouver area even offer a complete MDiv program. I think the only place that would give you a complete MDiv probably Regent. And I'm not sure about them. Trinity Western University, the university that's acquiring TEDs, used to have a full MDiv program. You go on their website today and you can't find their MDiv program.
I think they have like 2 professors in
they
theology.
got their 2 professors in their seminary.
Yeah.
One's in retirement.
These various articles are saying that the details of the, quote, merger are not finalized yet. But what's to merge?
Well, I mean, Trinity Western University has already trashed one seminary. Let's give them a second chance.
Yeah.
They trashed their own seminary. Why not let them do it again?
What's the plan to do things differently?
Well, they now share their seminary with Northwestern Seminary because they offloaded it. Basically, the history of Trinity Western was to train pastors in Canada.
Yeah.
I know this because my mother was a fundraiser for Trinity Western University when it was first started in 1957. But what happened was they started having the same problems at a lot faster rate than the other schools. So they divested a lot of their theological and divinity training to focus on secular skills programs like teaching certification, nursing, engineering, that sort of thing. So that's why Trinity became the largest, quote, Christian university, scare quote, in Canada. Now, you don't have to be Christian anymore to go to Trinity. They don't actually have you sign any faith statement or statement of lifestyle anymore.
So they're lowering the bar lower and lower.
It's lowering the bar.
And that is not a formula for
success. Again, that
success.
Race to the bottom. Everyone right now is racing to the bottom, hoping to survive this.
I still love that movie, Stand and Deliver. Math teacher gets the high school yabos, the worst class, the thugs, the gangsters. And he reaches a breaking point and he says, I'm not going to teach you math anymore. We're going to do calculus. And they were shocked. And he says, you can do it, you will do it, and you will do it with the top scores. And they did. He raised the bar and changed them.
Well, that's one of the missions of our channel, is to raise the bar to raise up the next generation of Christian leaders.
Well, we are
Because apparently the seminaries can't do it anymore. They're failing.
they're lowering the bar. I mean, to not have to be any sort of Christian.
Well, the MDiv lights.
Yeah.
Talk about the MDiv lights, because Trinity did that too, which is to start lowering the requirements of their MDiv. The MDiv used to be a 3.5-year program. You had to do 3 years of Greek, 2 years of Hebrew, and, it became a 3.5-year program.
But it was a language.
It was language-based. It was incredibly rigorous. It was difficult. If you wanted an A- in TEDS, you had to blood, sweat, and tear for it.
Almost nobody got a full A.
Nope.
And no one got an A+.
No one got A+. No.
Yeah.
That was an unheard of thing over there.
I mean, because no one's perfect.
Yeah.
And if you made a mistake, they found it.
And if you got, say, a magna cum laude or summa cum laude from Trinity, that was an achievement. That was an incredible achievement.
Yes.
And an MDiv from Trinity with a magna cum laude meant something. It meant something.
And it used to be, if you got a degree from TEDS, magna cum laude, every seminary on earth should have been fighting down the doors trying to hire you.
Yeah, it used to be that way. If you did get that kind of degree, there were churches that would have come knocking at your door to hire you.
Yeah.
That wasn't that long ago where that happened. Today, they'd rather have a used car salesman.
They resent education.
Yeah. And I think some of this has come down to also the cultural shift of anti-intellectualism within evangelicalism. The idea that you don't need formal training anymore. You don't need, you can get everything you need to know off your cell phone.
And how's that
so
working
all you have
out
to do,
for you?
And I've been through pastoral interviews where I've heard this. It's like, oh, well, how are you going to grow our numbers, and how are you going to relate to small families?
Yeah.
What? But aren't you going to ask me anything about my theology?
Mission statement?
My mission statement? My preaching style? My hymnody? Anything like that? Oh, no, we're only interested in how
are you going to grow our numbers?
Are you going to grow our numbers, and are you going to be relatable to couples with kids? Churches have become self-serving to the culture, and it's leading us down a dark path.
It's a social club. It's not church.
No.
A pastor is supposed to be a teacher. No. You're supposed to pay him to spend 20 hours a week that most people who have to do 9-to-5 jobs don't have the time to do deeper study and then share that with the congregation.
Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. Peter, do you love me? You know I do, Lord. Feed my sheep. Peter, do you love me?
You heard me twice already. How many times do you want me to say it? Of course I love you, God.
Feed my sheep. Our pastors are failing to feed the sheep.
They're psychological
and
life
the congregation
coaches.
Getting sick on spiritual junk food. That's what's happening to our congregations. They don't want sound teaching anymore.
They choke on it.
They choke on it. Yeah, they wouldn't recognize it if they saw it.
I still remember the sermon you preached in Toronto.
Oh, yeah.
You read your final version. I'm like, this may be your one time to preach at this church, and you dumbed it down so much. Why'd you water it down so much? And you preached it, and they choked.
They choked.
There was maybe 3 or 4 people in that church, those 2 brothers.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I haven't heard a sermon like that since my father preached in India. Oh, by the way, they hated him too, so he did a great job. But they choked on milk.
Yeah, they choked on milk. They choked on milk.
I was wondering why you dumped it down and they choked.
Mm-hmm. But as I say, preachers don't know how to preach anymore, and the congregation, the sheep, are getting sick on spiritual junk food. They're eating the equivalent of spiritual Doritos, and that's all they want. They want to know, how do I make my kids behave? And how do I excel at my job?
How do I make more money?
Yeah. The cares of this world. The very thing we were warned about in the sower and the seed, where the seed gets choked off by the cares of this world.
And that's exactly what all these administrations of these various seminaries are doing.
Yeah.
They're looking at this world, the manicured lawn, the student center.
Yeah.
Whereas you had a wise administration who said, hey, natural planting.
Yeah.
We had a bog in the back parking lot with a beaver.
When we were there, it was the coolest place to go to seminary.
We had brilliant professors.
We had brilliant professors. We had students who were interested in learning.
We had students from people who had been in a small town, one denomination all their lives, to people who were pagan, got saved, and came to you to say, hey, you know, how does this work?
Yeah. I met a refugee from North Korea there. The point is that there were a lot of great professors there.
We were shaped as much by their character and the fact that we have personal relationships with these people. We're still on their Facebook pages. They're still having an impact.
Yeah.
They're still an encouragement.
You do lose that interpersonal relationship if you go online.
You don't build a network.
You don't build a network either. Yeah, because you have no personal relations.
Yeah.
You can't go out to lunch with them.
Yeah.
How many times have we been out to lunch with professors? Many times.
Well, they think you and I are interesting. I still remember.
Bruce Fields, yeah.
Yeah. But like Bruce Fields, he taught us, you write a 10-page paper. It's 10 pages. It's not 12.
Mm-hmm.
It's not 9. And it's double spaced. Not 1.5. Not 3. So guess what? A 10-page paper is a 20-page speech.
Yeah.
So at conferences, you and I can hit that 20-minute mark. Dead on.
John Kildner, 50 words. Condense your entire thought to 50 words. That was a really hard lesson for you to learn.
Bioethics.
But
and he waited to tell.
He had the reason.
Yeah, but he waited to tell me till the end of class, so I kept screwing that one up because my brain could not accept 50 words. But you're told to write a summary.
Yeah. 1 inch. 1 inch column is 50 words in a newspaper.
Yeah. And you have to sum up the most pertinent.
Yeah.
Everything's important.
Everything's important.
You have to be able to crystallize the most pertinent and communicate
Condense
that.
It.
Yeah.
Condense it.
You don't get that online.
Yeah.
You don't get Kilner's personal story.
Yeah.
He went into bioethics for a reason. He has family members that are affected by different issues.
Yeah.
You don't get that online.
No. No. So I think this is an incredible tragedy that Trinity Evangelical Divinity School is dead. Effectively dead.
And last year at ETS, there wasn't a TEDS alumni gathering.
Yeah.
We
didn't know why.
We didn't know why.
Now we
now
do.
We do.
Yeah. So the writing on the wall for Trinity had been there for a long time. It had. This is. I mean, this comes as a shock to many, because many were not aware of the problems there. But if you had been to the school and if you had kept in touch, you saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah, and overall, 2 major problems that are affecting everybody. One is this race to the bottom,
yeah,
where they're trying to go online and do it cheaper
Mhm.
and more accessible. And that is not a formula for success. And the whole idea of churches saying, oh, we don't need trained pastors.
And I would add
We'll just teach them ourselves.
and I would add to that, ejecting their most successful programs and their successes. Throwing away their successes to become more generic.
Yeah.
To become more
Generic
generic divinity schools.
generic is not the answer.
No.
What's distinctive?
So basically it is those three problems: financial mismanagement, pride, and that race to the bottom. That sums up what's happening to schools, in divinity schools, seminaries in general. Okay, you think we can wrap it up here? All right. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up here. As you can see, this is not a problem that is distinct to TEDS. It is something that is affecting Christian education across North America. TEDS is just the thin edge of the wedge here. It's going to hit other seminaries next. And, while a lot of Baptist seminaries are right now lauding themselves, saying that, they're surviving the storm, yeah, they're on the same course. Okay. So, this is basically a siren call to all of Christianity to wake up and really take a hard look at themselves, what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong. Keep what's right and fix what's wrong. Okay? So we hope you learned something today. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible.